I'm Duke Craven from Kingdom of Aidenveld. Thanks for the guys from Out of Kingdom coming in. Really appreciate it. I guess in this class, the relevance of performance is important. So, I've been King of Aidenveld about 6 times. I've been in a knight since 95. Won a few tourneys here and there and other places and so forth. So I thought it might be worthwhile to put my experiences and some of my thoughts on preparing for tournaments, because I think it's a big factor that a lot of people miss out. And a lot of my students, I try to spend the time teaching them a little bit of this, because, like in our culture, when you're a squire, we recommend that you go fight in crown so the knights can see you. You get an opportunity to show what you have on, final exam day and that kind of tournament. With that being said, take this from the perspective of this is stuff that's my ideas and thoughts about it. It's probably very common in some areas, and the intent of this material is really more directed at you trying to figure out what works best for you. And maybe this might get you a kind of a frame of mind and a thought process to look at when you do work with this area in your fighting, because everybody's going to be different. Our experiences in growing up in life have been different. And some people are naturally really good at this kind of thing and they don't have a problem with it. Some people struggle with this, like myself. I always struggled with tournaments for a long time. And, and I figured out some tools to help me do, perform better. Right. So, and I think part of the tourney prep, you can sit there and, in an initial conversation, you often will start with, that day, what you're going to do that day, or maybe the night before. And really tourney prep starts really early. You need to have your goal, and that's the tournament. We're going to talk about, getting your training in order. That's the pre-tournament planning, then the close planning, which is your equipment, and working on your brain for dealing with things. And really that is more the aspect of controlling your environment and so forth before the tournament, so you're not distracted and so forth. So let's get to the getting your training ready. I think really the thing is what is your goal? What is the tournament that you want to do? Because that factor is the date of the tournament, the tells you how much time you have to prepare for it. And also you need to start researching what type of tournament is there, and the way you got to look at that is I kind of I use a lot of melee reference aspect, because I think most of us all have been fought in melees and participated in melees. And the way we look at melees, there's a lot of thought process that's very similar. It's just your army is, you're an army of one at this point, right? So, when we're looking at the tourney, we need to know what our objective is. Just like in a melee, it's like, you can fight good in a melee and lose the battle because you didn't, achieve the objective, and that was capture a flag because you were too busy trying to kick everybody's ass, So, figure out what type of tourney it is. Is it a double limb? What's the winning conditions? Is it, best 2 out of 3, you have a double limb? Is it a bear pit? And, your wins count towards the success of the tournament or not. Those factors really, help you with planning your, training prior to that tournament. Knowing when the tournament is going to give you the time frame of, how long you got to train and how to plan out your training. And that becomes kind of important as you go on with things. Once you determine that date and the time frame and then what the objective is for that tournament that day, now you got to start thinking about your practice, right? And we have the mindset for practice. What are you thinking about there? What are you sharpening, right? Because each of us are different. So you need to determine where you're at in time frame with that tournament and what things you need to work on, because everybody has the stuff that's working good for you at that time. And maybe during your training, you instituted some new piece to your fighting. Like, let's say you changed your footwork a little bit, or you adjusted your guard, to where your hand position changed and so forth. So you really dynamically changed your whole fighting style in a lot of ways. And I think that's important to bring to mind, because we're always evolving. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm always changing how I fight, trying to figure out new techniques or applying additional tools into my bag so I can adjust on the fly and so forth. And so when you're doing that and then you have a tournament coming up, that has affected your fighting. You might not have that material fully incorporated into your tool set. So it's a little bit of a distractor at that point because, you know, like for example, I added a thrusting tip. I never fought with a thrusting tip because, you know, early on we stopped doing it because thrusting tips had to be 2 inches in diameter. And, you know, you throw that on a single sword, it's pretty much, you know, softens every offside you throw and every flat snap you throw and everything else. And it was not, you know, the rule set did not work well for sword fighting, right? And so later on, I decided to do that myself. It's like, hey, I'll add a thrusting tip. The low profiles, those are kind of cool, you know. So I just started adding it, and you know, you think that'd be easy for somebody that's been fighting for a while, and it's not. And it really changed fighting for me in a lot of ways because, you know, I went to a crown tournament, and you know, I was sitting there thrusting like an idiot at stuff because I'm not even thinking right. I didn't incorporate my fighting very well, so it changed things, and I did not put any time and effort into it before going to crown, you know. You know, it was just, you know, bad planning on my side, I guess, you know, intentional or unintentional, it doesn't even matter. But so I need to evaluate what am I going to be doing before that tournament? What has changed my fighting? Where's my fighting at? And you have to give a real honest look, you know, because there might be some technique that you're trying to apply that you think is really awesome and you enjoy, like, hey, yeah, I really like doing this, you know, this guard and so forth. And you really haven't honed it down. You know, that might need to go on the list of, hey, I really got to get this guard down a lot better. And then also you start finding out about what are your bad habits, right? You want to start identifying your weak areas in your fighting. So what, like, you know, go to practice, just do some fighting. You know, if, you know, you have a multiple style weapon tournament coming up, go out there, get that weapon, you know, and go fight people and figure out, you know, where are you weak, you know, because, you know, you never really think about it until you're at practice and you're sitting on your knees because somebody keeps legging you over and over and you start thinking, why am I getting legged? And, you know, and this is not, you know, this is a much better time than on tournament day going, I really should have practiced fighting on my knees, right? You know, instead of, I really should have practiced blocking that leg. You know, those are, you know, so you want to go out there and see where you're at and give a good evaluation and be honest with yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up because I think as fighters, a lot of times when we're out fighting, we often beat ourselves up because we want to be better and better and better. We, you know, we want to be the guy, you know, and so we're our harshest critic, you know, which is a benefit to us because it drives us and motivates us to get out there and do better and keep learning. But you know, when you're doing an honest look at yourself, you can't beat yourself up for everything, you know, otherwise you get distracted and you go down the wrong path and you're not focused on what really matters. So, you know, and what I do at this point, when I'm out practice, you know, I'll sit there and start thinking to myself about, you know, a list of things that I did wrong. You know, it's like, am I spending too much time fighting a guy on his knees and I'm not closing the deal? You know, or am I getting legged? Am I dropping my guard at the wrong time or I'm not recovering from my guard very well? And, you know, and I start adding those and I basically, I make these rules for myself, right? You know, and I evaluate them driving home from practice and everything. And he was like, you know, I fought like 6 people tonight. We fought really hard and I had no intensity or, you know, I kept dropping my hand when I was throwing the offside and it just wasn't good. So I add that to this list, you know, and after about 2 practices or 3, I kind of get an idea of, hey, you have a habit that you built that's not working well. You just have not been conditioning it or you've not been maintaining it or whatever. And I add it to a list and I build a rules list, right? And that rules list is, you know, a continual thing until the tournament. And, you know, I'll go in a little bit more with that after at the end of this section, but you know, I add it to my list, right? You know, and then I'll see focused from that point forward where I'm like, all right, I'm going to work on the stuff that's the habits, you know, dropping my guard because I recover, my recovery is terrible and I'm getting hit in the face because my shield drops, you know. I think everybody understands that concept. I'll go through those things and I'll start keeping track of those. Those are really important for me because, you know, sometimes you have habits and you're going to keep the habit even in the day of performance. But if you know how to negotiate your habits and how to, you know, mitigate your issues with these habits or, you know, exploit them, because when you're fighting your kingdom, a lot of people know who you are, how you fight. They have an idea, and they depend on that a little bit. So sometimes you can use that to your advantage or not. So as I'm going through and I got those list of things, right? I also start working on, the closer I get to the tournament, to train for intensity. Because let's face it, most tournaments, you're in there, the last two rounds are probably the more intense. That's when you're meeting your peers that are at the higher skill level set, right? They have the most practice. They get used to being in the tournament. And, you need to sit there and, be your most focused at that point, right? And what I look at intensity in myself, and right before, a tournament. And, and all I'm concerned with is having an intense fight, right? Because sometimes we get in a habit when we go to practice, we evaluate how good we do based off if we're winning or losing, because it's a tangible thing. It's an on or an off, right? And practice is definitely not that place where you're supposed to be practicing, do I win or not? Because, you can be king of practice, but that doesn't get you very much in, the level of respect in the world. So I work on that intensity, and I make sure that I have, the stupid mistakes that you make, it's where you're dropping your guard, where you normally don't do that. You don't finish killing guys on their knees easy or whatever. I work on those things. But while I'm doing that, I'm keeping track of my timeline. And this is this point here on this, look at peaking. I remember we used to have these discussions and these training sessions at a local practice or a private practice. And, one of the guys was running, marathons and doing a ton of running and stuff, right? And we started talking, and he brought something up about peaking. And I was like, what is he talking about? So I started doing some research on what is peaking, what is it about, and how does it affect training and so forth. And I found this article here, where they start talking about how to manage peaking. Because the thing is what it is you start training so hard and you're on this cycle, and, you want to be at your best performance level when you get to your tournament, right? And for runners, it's that day of running. They don't want to go past their peak and then have their second best time. They want their best time. So you have to sit there and manage what your peaking is, and that's, obviously individualistic and so forth. That article explains it a lot better than I do, and it gives some good information, but it's something to, a tool to put into your kit and start thinking about, and I started learning that, like, if I hit practice pretty hard, like when I was in the metropolitan area of Phoenix, there was a lot more practices. And, now I'm down in the southern part of the state, and we have like one main practice, right? So that volume of practice actually adjusted my managing my amount of time before I could peak, right? So like in Phoenix, I could spend 2 months fighting hard, and, and that's just really just, working on, the tool pieces, working on intensity and focus and so forth at practice, trying to figure out where I'm at. And I would have to sit there and, and I realized I learned for myself, and unfortunately this takes time to do. It's like any statistics that you're studying for something, it took me a while to figure out. It's like, yeah, pretty much 2 months before like a crown, I need to manage my time, and I need to taper off the last month. The first month I can hit really hard. The month prior to that, so this is 3 months out, I'm kind of revving up, and that's my, exploratory practices, where I'm figuring out what are my weaknesses, what am I doing wrong, where are things I need to improve, what tools do I have that are not working and I need to throw out because, they're becoming gimmicks rather than effective tools in my fighting style. So I'll look at that, and at that point, of before the tournament, I started building my rules, right? Like I mentioned earlier. And the rules, I started doing rules for myself for the fact that I was having trouble with focus and intensity at tournaments. I would get there and, I would just perform so terrible at a tournament. And, and then, and when you work for hours every week, you get to the day that you wanted to perform and you don't even do well. and you're like, it was all pointless work. It was worthless. And you go home going, why am I even doing this shit in the first place? Right. And so I was going through that a lot personally. And, and I was like, God, and I remember Sir's Mania at the time told me, she's like, when you're at practice, you fight so much better at practice. You're just killing it at practice. You get in the tournament, it goes off, and then, of course, everybody's like, your friends will be like, well, you just choke, right? And it's probably true. I guess it is choking. You just don't want to admit it, right? But what I realized was, I was taking tournament, which is a different world than training, but I didn't traverse across that and bring that training over to tournament. And that was the mindset, right? So I created these rules to keep myself focused so I wouldn't do stupid mistakes. So like my rule number one, I was always, when they say lay on, move, because I remember getting one shot in a tournament, standing there, and that was when you only had one fight with somebody. They pop you in your eyes. You have one death. This is the second round. The third round, you're out because you made two critical mistakes. And one of them was because I just stood there like an idiot, right? So I made this list and I started doing that. So, I added, hey, they say lay on, I need to move, even if it's to disengage or walk on the outer circle or, do something, because motion will help protect me rather than me standing still becoming a target to be hit with a stick, and then and the other rule was, this is just for funny, the funny part for me, but it's like, it's like, hey, he's not dead until he says good, good, good. Because how many times have you hit somebody, you thought they were dead, they weren't dead, they killed you, you went home, and you wish you hit them harder, right? And accidents happen in our sport, and that's just the way it is. But, I put that in there for the rule. So my mind would be, I just continue on until I know the person's dead and they admit, they say, hey, you bested me at this point or not. And that's why I say good, good, good when I get hit, because I want the guy to know, yeah, don't hit me anymore. We're good, man. But I don't fault him for it because, hey, he doesn't know for sure, because he might not have heard me. I may be blocking still, and he's like, well, you're blocking. Why are you saying good? And it's like, well, I like my ribs, but anyhow, so I have those 10, the rules, and, and I try to take everything from my training to remind myself of the mistakes that I'm making at the current time. And I keep that list. And when I get to tournament time, I go over my list and I use that more. Pretty much, that's the training part really to me. It's, it's so open to interpretation and also to how you personally deal with it. So anybody have any questions about this, this prep part, on the training, because you gotta use your training to build up on your building blocks and find, it's sharpening your sword. It's basically what it is. And getting ready, because you don't want that baggage to show up at tournament. You don't roll out of your car and just go fight in the tournament and win. Those guys, those are the 1%ers, and they show up 1% of the time anyways. So the rest of us have to work and put the time and effort into it. All right, so I'm going to go on, move on to getting your equipment ready. Obviously, having your equipment ready is very important, right? If you have a broomed out sword and you go show up to your tournament, you're fighting with a broomed out sword and nobody takes shots, and they're curious of why you're hitting them and they have no power. So, it's spend the time, make swords. Everybody has their rituals. So you want to definitely, make sure all your equipment's ready. Like myself, I make a sword a couple weeks before a tournament. So I have a newish sword, but I also want to be able to have it in my hand and go fight with it for a couple times, because I need to shave the handle down a little more. I don't have some manual that I wrote up so I can, replicate every sword exactly the same, but I have a process and I go through, shave the handle. And it's like, sometimes I don't sand it enough, whatever, for tournament, or I forget to put a lanyard on or whatever. I didn't tape the hilt on very well. But I go through and make sure I get all that done, make sure that my equipment is ready. I re-rim my shield, I'll, paint up my, I'll do another coat of paint on the canvas or whatever. And, I go through and check all my straps, my rivets and everything. I mean, it's the usual deal. It's just like prepping for war. You don't want to be in the middle of a battle and have a strap blow out on you. And then you lost out on the fun because the war happened that day, not, every day of the week. Right. So it's really important to go through and check all your stuff. And the other part I like to do, and this is for you, Merrick, I like to take the tape off my helmet, the war stickers off my helmet, make sure that my helmet is polished and clean and ready to represent my consort. So that is my big plug, is get rid of the tape and the stickers. And then, I make sure, my handle on my shield and all that stuff's done. So really, it's just running through your equipment. It's really important. And the thing is do that the week before. That way everything's fresh and ready, and you're confident in your equipment. Because what is the worst thing to happen? You're in a Crown tournament. You get to the final round, and your sword breaks. That's the worst thing ever, right? And you're trying to finish the day. Now you're distracted. You lost a day because your stupid sword broke, or you borrowed somebody else's. I mean, that's a nightmare to happen, especially when you worked for months. Like in a Crown's case, you could be working for years just to, get to the point of, hey, I'm in the semifinals and I just really blew it today, So it's a really important thing. It's just something we take for granted, because when you're a fighter, you're always making swords. You're always rimming your shield. You're always fixing straps. You're always, you're always doing shit to your equipment, so it becomes normal place for us, so when something breaks, it's like, oh shit, I didn't go through my stuff, But these are those moments, between wars and crowns, you should be able to keep your equipment in good shape. And, that's what keeps me on track. So I'm going to go to those questions in here. Merrick asked, what is your strategy or style for those hard conversation questions on the tourney field? And the conversation part, it's like, over the years, it's changed, early on, because we used to have this thought process in our kingdom, and a lot of my tournament experience really is, focus has always been crown. At first it was always we swore this sword oath, we're not going to question our opponent or whatever. And the way I took that was, you just don't question them literally. Right. So, I lost, tournaments, there was guys I couldn't hit hard enough. Either I was just, not prepared to hit them, and I had bad technique, or they expected a harder shot. It's just nature of the beast, right? And you just shut up about it and go on. So those days, I learned to be the best defensive fighter I ever could be, because if he can't hit me, I don't die, and I just have to outlast him. He'll get tired, because really, if you guys watch a lot of fighters fight in a long tournament that can't close the deal, they get tired. The guy that wins is the one that goes longer, and you don't even have to hit the guy hard anyways at that point. But but those conversations, as time has changed, it came in question. It's like, I swear to trust my opponent's judgment, right? And I have to respect that. And that's what that really is about. So if somebody asks me about a shot, or I feel like I'm hitting somebody, I really don't say much about when I hit people. I just, because I guess I just condition myself not to just care and keep moving on, because it's that other thing that takes my focus away from finishing the deal, right? But if somebody asks me about a shot, I teach my squires and myself, and I try to live this, is my job as a person in the relationship in this tournament with this other person is to be honest and fair with whatever I think and feel. So if somebody asks me about a shot I threw and I don't know, I really tell them I don't know. If I think I threw hard and I hit something hard, I tell them I threw something hard and I hit something hard. If I hit them in the face and I thought it was hard, I tell them, yeah, I thought I connected to your face really well. If I didn't, and I'm not sure, I tell them, I didn't think, I don't think I did. I think I hit your shield possibly. My job is to be fair. I don't need a cheap win to make me feel better. And I don't need to cheat out my opponent. It's sportsmanship. And, and I try to live that as best as I can. We all fail at points, right? But, when they ask about shots for me taking, I sit there and I ask their opinion. It's like, do you think you threw it really hard or not? And if they're like, yeah, I really did throw it hard. And I'm like, well, I didn't feel anything on my leg. So I bet you it was my shield, because I would feel something hard on my leg. And I try to make sure to process it. But either way, it's have that conversation, be honest. But with that rules that we swear on our list is like, you accept your blows and you trust your opponent's judgment. I try to remember whatever they decide, I have to respect. The best thing that happens is if we both discuss it. If we both can discuss it, that means it's done and over with, and we both got to have our opinion. Because shit happens. Not everything happens the way you think it happened in your brain. You know, and it's a lot better to discuss, get it done, and then you walk off the field and you still can be friends, because that's the key thing there. And it's about being a good sportsman. How do you deal with nervousness before or during a tournament? Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because that was the planning your tourney day section of my notes. The key thing about nervousness, to me, and this is from my perspective. I don't, I'm not like some scientist that studied these things. We know how that goes, right? But anyhow, the way I try to deal with it a lot of ways is preparing. If I'm prepared, it's just like taking a test. It's like going for a job interview. You need to prepare. You need to be ready. The key things that are involved in that particular thing. So you got to get ready, right? So I got to, control that part is the only part that I can. How I feel that day and the nervousness, I show up the crown and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I don't know if I'm going to fight well. It's like, I don't know how the day is, because, I have to go round by round, and so for that part, I sit there and I go do some warm-ups. It's like, oh, I got to jump in. It's just like in a melee. We show up to, a war practice or a melee, and, we all form up and wherever we're supposed to go, and we're supposed to go fight, and they say lay on. That first battle is always it's the appetizer to remind you what you're hungry for, and so I go do a pickup to get myself to knock out those jitters a little bit, and also get myself engaged. It's like anything you do, it's the staying engaged and reminding yourself what you're there for and focused on that, and like, the nervousness during the tournament, that's what the rules, my little rules for the day work for me, because I get done fighting. I go back over to my area. I found out I don't like to have a lot of distraction around me, because it does get me out of my focus. So, my thing is I go sit and I go think about my rules, my list. I can think about fighting, but, to me, whatever is in my head is not going to be out in that field the next round. So I got to go out in that next round with a blank slate, ready to fight whoever I'm supposed to fight and react to them, and not have some preconceived notions in my head stuck there about some other fight that I had or the last time I fought them or whatever. I go through my rules. It's like, hey, keep hitting him until he says he's good. They say lay on, move. Don't play with your food when you're fighting people on their knees, because you're wasting too much time and you're going to get hit wasting time. So I go through that, and that helps what manages me. And then I try to keep the distractions out, because distractions, people are like, hey, you did really well that time, or boy, that didn't look so great, and then you start like doubting yourself. And so so that's the thing, is just figure out some kind of methodology of the thing you can control is your schedule, your time, your thinking, your environment. And that's one of the best ways to help with the nervousness. Practice and going and doing the tournaments are going to get you over the nervousness a lot of times. It's like I've been in the finals a few times, and each time it does get easier with the nerve side, because I've been there and I've done it already. So that makes it a lot easier, So you got to throw yourself out in that fire a few times just to get into that. Let's talk about that week before the tournament, because really everything has been prep. You've been trained to prep for your tournaments, evaluating yourself, keeping track of yourself, trying to maintain your training, and then also trying to prevent peaking during your training before the tournament. The other part of it is like any tournament, like, I said, it's like a final exam. It's like a job interview. It's, you need to be focused. That's your day. And I remember having a friend who, had, 3 kids, and, going to show up to the tournament, and he wanted to win crown bad, and he's worked hard, and his skill sets were there. He was a good fighter. I personally knew, yeah, he's going to definitely, he could win if he wanted to. He just has to, put it all together and make it out there. And that's the same for a lot of guys. There's just a small little piece to the focus, or the making sure their shit's fixed, I mean, there's always some little thing, but when you have everything together and you put your time and effort, you'll succeed. And he was in those shoes. And the thing I realized was, the guy, my buddy's got 3 kids. He wants to win a crown. And that night before, you pack to go to the event. And if anybody has kids, they understand, and, and a wife, there's a lot of things that go into getting packed and ready for the event the next day. But from the start of that day to the day you show up and set up a pavilion, there's a lot of things that interact with you and your family and everybody else, your household, your night, everything, right? So there's all these pieces that are showing up. They're all distractors. There are things that can take you away from focus. You get in an argument with your wife over where you're going to go eat breakfast. The tent didn't go up because somebody forgot the hammer. So-and-so wants you to go help set up this thing. And, there's all these little pieces of things. And, your kids want your attention. That amount of focus that you got to put in has to be so much involved, and you have to figure out. And the best way I recommend to work on that is get those people on your team. Those people are important to your team, your wife, your spouse, your partner, your family, all those people that are involved with you are a key thing to what you have to do. So you need to get with those people and say, hey, I need your help to finish this. I need you to, this is what I'm struggling with. It's communicating. It's just like any, like with your spouse, it's like any relationship thing where you're like, hey, when you don't help with the laundry, it makes me feel like I'm your laundry bitch. It's like, can we do this together and I'll make sure to help you do something else? You know what I mean? You have to have those honest conversations. Those are very important for people. And you got to go, hey, I really want to do this. I need your support. Your family will help you, because the distractions are the things that take you out of focus. What to think about: winning, your losses, something other than the tourney. One of the biggest things that you have to sit there and look at is, what are you thinking about in that tournament? And my advice is round by round. It's like any sport. You have to go inning by inning in baseball, play by play in football. You got to stay focused on the one thing. Some people have a theory of imagine yourself winning and so forth. I'm from the school of thought. I'm the guy that wants to take it away. That makes me more hungry. Some people want to defend the crown. It's like, you got to take the crown from me. I'm going to win it. And I'm like, I want to take the crown from you. And, and you need to figure out what perspective works best for you, because that's the guy in the back of your head that's going to take that tournament. That's the one that's hungry and wants to do the focus and the energy and the work to win. Because the only time, winning counts is in a tournament. Practice, it doesn't count. Doesn't count in your dreams. It's the tournament, and putting that effort and time into there is what gets it. And that's for any tournament. It's like I fought in some, I've been doing rapier the last 4 or 5 years, and, I've gone to some tournaments, and it's like, you go from hard suit where you're like, hey, yeah, I do really well here, and I, enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. And you go to something else, and you're like, man, I stink. It's like, I got so much to learn, but you have to learn. I go fight in tournaments, and it's like, yeah, it's like I'm a new guy in a lot of ways in rapier tournaments, because I have to learn the nuances of that. There's stuff I know, I just don't know how to apply it. I got to learn how to apply it in this particular forum. But it is that preparation and trying to get focused and to do better in there. And then and you have to do that. And that day before and that day, you need to sit there and make that your priority. You need to focus on that. It's like, I sit there and I think of, all right, tomorrow we're going to have breakfast here. So we don't have to have the argument of where do you want to eat? What do you want? That always comes up. It's like, where do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you feel like? It's like, no, let's not waste that damn time. It's like, we're going to eat here. I'm going to get some fuel in my body, because I need fuel in my body for the tournament. I can't end the day without gas in the tank. It's like, I got to make sure I get a good night's sleep. I've had friends that, back in the day, the rule was, it's like, hey, if you want to win, go get wasted the night before, show up and go fight. right? And there's guys that have done that, and it's worked out great for them. And the reason why is they could focus. They were so hungover, they don't want to get hit in the head, and that's all they thought about. So they spent the whole day not trying to get hit because they're, we're so hungover. But unfortunately, that doesn't last too long. We all get old, right? Make sure you got your packing list figured out so you don't forget everything. Check your gear, make sure everything's in your armor bag, make sure everything is there. But go over that rules, that list for yourself, and just get them down to where they're not forgotten, because that'll help keep you in the tournament and then fight every round by every round. That should be a list, a rule on your, a rule on your list. Any tournament you fight, it's round by round. Who cares? And after a round, don't think about what happened the round before. If you're still in, you have another round to go to. You need to keep your mind on the objective, and that is, performing. How do you recover from a loss? That's a tough one, but to me, it was a pane of glass to break at one point, to where it's like you lose and then the next round you're out, and I mean, I've watched it happen so many times, just, being a fighting observer, like that guy died. Well, we're going to really see if he's if he's going to make it, because if he can't win after that, he's in trouble, you're going to die. And you see it happen all the time. And, for me, it was the same way, and it's like, and you always battle it, at least in my opinion. And the thing I figured out for me was, it is going from round to round. So if I lost a round, it's like that fight was that fight. I have another life left. I should be focused on finishing out the day. And, and after you go, and there's nothing like that, you get killed, and then the next round you beat a guy and you move on. Usually we recover pretty quick that way, but it's like, it is a milestone. You're like, hey, yeah, the death didn't stick in my head. I didn't think, because you don't think about it. You have to let it go. And it's like, that was yesterday. I don't care about it. Whatever. I made a mistake. You just own it, move on. It's just like, I do that at work all the time. It's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. Well, I got to back up. Let's move on, and just go forward. You have to stay focused forward. Don't go too many rounds out. Don't think about, oh, well, when I fight so-and-so, it's like, I'm fighting the fifth round. So whoever I got in the fifth round, that's who I need to think about killing. And that's all my focus is right now until the fifth round is done. So you said your rules are supposed to help you. How do you format them? The format of the rules is basically, like I said, I just make 10 rules and they just have to make sense to me, to be honest with you, but really they have to be things that are helping me prevent from making mistakes that are stupid, like you hear Leon and I stand still and I get hit by somebody like Alanon who can reach, 4 guys lengths of dodges, the common mistakes I make that I found out in practice, to where I'm making the same mistake over and over that I should not be, So really, that's all it is. It's like, hey, keep moving. It's like, don't play with your food. So I use it like a catchphrase for that, because I was sitting there legging guys, and I would sit there and putz around with them outside of range instead of like engaging with them to take them out. And I had no reason for doing it. That was my problem. And it's like, why are you poking the guys? And I mean, you did this 2 weeks in a row. It's like, you're gonna leg a guy, finish the fight. And this is a bad habit, because you don't want to go to crown playing with that, and then the guy that's really good kills you, and you're like, I shouldn't have done that, right? So it's like, hey, don't play with your food is how I did it, to remember that name and formatted it that way. I've been watching all the Ducal interviews and all that shit, and I want to tell you, all those guys, I've known a lot of them over the years, just from going to events and fighting and talking and bullshitting with them. They are all there, just like myself. They just need you to knock on our door. The reason they don't go knocking on everybody's door is because it becomes a little me camp when you start checking on everybody to, in their goodwill, but those people are there. They're the people that are experienced. You think about it, your job, you go to work and there's a guy that's been there 15 years doing the job, do you go ask him how to do something, or do you just try to figure it out? The smart guys that want to excel go, hey man, how do you wire that fuse box? I've been doing it this way. Oh, that's stupid. Let me show you the best way to do it, and this will meet code. You know what I mean? You ask those experienced people. That's what they're there for. That's their specialty. You don't ask me how to make pottery, but if you want to ask about, fighting sword and shield, you ask me a question. Don't ask about greatsword. I'll tell you the basics and that's it, and go talk to this guy. That's my job. You know, what is your opinion of earned advantages? There's different schools of thought. The bottom line is, however you think you should deal with it is how you should deal with it, is my opinion. Mine is this. I go to practice, and work very hard to hit targets. And if I hit you in the target and then I give up my advantage because I armed you, well, why go for your arm? It's like, why do I handicap myself for going to practice? Somebody hits me in the arm, I'm like, my first thought is not them taking their own arm. My first thought is, please don't hit me too hard, because I really don't want to be broken. So it's really I earn the advantage. It's, there's, and I can give up the advantage, and a lot of people are like, hey, that's, the honorable thing to do. And, and there's no right or wrong answer, because I've debated this in my own head for over the years. I'm like, why do they say, hey, huzzah, and, clap over, like, hey, Joe Bob hit him in the arm and then gave his own away, And it's like, yeah, that's fair. You're trying to make it a fair fight, and I can see that. But another part of me is, if somebody's fighting me, I should have blocked. I want to be honest in my sport. To me, it's like, I should have blocked it. It was his earned advantage. And, it's like, you go kill a guy. Does he go, hey, I'm going to die too, because I want to keep it fair? He's like, you're dead. Thank you. Thank God. We're done. Let's go to the next guy. Right. So think about it but the thing is, honestly though, it is your decision. Don't let anybody else make that decision for you. We each play this game different ways. There's guys that, like, I'm a sports fighter. I'm a guy that's more focused on the sport than the aesthetic. There's guys that like to do the period stuff. They're not wrong. I'm not wrong. And you gotta, so I have to respect them, and I admire them because they put effort into it. They make that, an art. Me, I like the fighting. I want to, do the sport part. That's the part that I enjoy, obviously. That's why I think about focus and so forth. So whatever your decision is yours. You keep it. Just be consistent. That's the problem I always see. You give up an arm for the squire, but you don't give up the arm for the knight, and you're toting yourself as a chivalrous guy. No, a real chivalrous guy will do the same action over and over and over. So if you can't do it over and over for the other guy, then that's on you.
How'd you psych yourself up? You're supposed to psych.
Psych myself up?
If I fight you, knowing that you're much better than I am in Hardsu, what mindset should I get into? What recommendation would you have for the mindset that I should put myself into?
Okay, I got it.
Somebody like you.
I follow you now. You guys want the honest answer. That's easy. I'll be honest with you. It is a struggle because, like, hey, I fight good guys, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's good. What am I going to do? And I remind myself, yeah, there's people that train and have a lot more expertise than myself, but I have what I have, and I need to go in there with what I have and trust that I can do it. And I need to stay focused on what, the fight, and fighting my best, and everybody can die. There's nobody that can walk around going, nobody can kill me. I'm the best in the SCA. Nobody is the best in the SCA, because there's always one freaking guy out there that's better than you. You're going to meet him one day, and he's going to eat you for lunch and send you home taking your lunch money. That's the beauty, because it would be very boring if you got to a peak and you lasted forever, right? But the other part of that too, is really just, staying focused into the fight, give your best fight. It's like, hey, what else can you do? The other one is motivation. My thing is, and I know this is going to sound silly, and, and I have a squire that has a hard time being aggressive, right? And you have to put yourself in a position where you need to hit that person, right? Well, I always tell people, it's like, imagine that person raped your dog. It's disturbing that somebody would do that to an animal, right? In your brain, you're like, that's just uncalled for. Why would you do that? Well, you don't think of murdering them, but you do think of hitting them like an idiot because you can do it. So maybe that could be your motivation. You need to find those things that motivate you, be an actor for a little bit, get in a role. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I mean, you want to find out about my experience, I'm going to give you my opinion from my point of view, not the this is how it's done. There's enough people to tell you how it's supposed to be done, and you need to figure it out for you. And I guess we can finish this one at this point.